Welcome to Not My Reality. I'm your host as always, Vince Stradamus. Remember back in our old reality, before things got switched around and the Shroud of Turin was just some kind of fake, some forgery? Well, in our new reality, that seems to have changed. Let's take a new look at the Shroud of Turin. What is the Shroud of Turin? The Shroud of Turin is a linen cloth that stretches 4.37 meters long and 1.13 meters wide. It is emblazoned with negative images of a man whose injuries resemble those of a crucifixion victim. These images include an anatomically accurate image of the front and back of a nude man, as well as the negative version of this man's face. The Shroud has undergone considerably more scientific testing than any other relic in human history. So Peter went out with the other disciple, and they were going toward the tomb. Both of them, they were running together, but the other disciple outran Peter and reached the tomb first. In stooping to look in, he saw the linen cloths laying there, but he did not go in. Then Simon Peter came, following him, and he went into the tomb. He saw the linen cloths lying there, and the face cloth, which had been on Jesus' head, not lying with the linen cloths, but folded up in a place by itself. Then the other disciple, who reached the tomb first, also went in, and he saw and believed. John 23-8. Many Catholics have held the Shroud of Turin to be the main linen burial cloth of Jesus discovered by the disciples in the tomb. Then the shroud was carbon dated in 1988 by 3 different labs, and these tests showed the linen to date to 1260, 1390 AD, seeming to prove the shroud a medieval fake, a forgery. Since then, though, researchers have uncovered overwhelming evidence pointing to the shroud's authenticity. It might be real. Let's take a look. Welcome. Is this my reality? Is this your reality? Is the shroud a medieval fake? Well, let's take a look at its history. Historical accounts follow the shroud from Antioch to the region of Sicilia in modern-day Turkey to Constantinople, where it was kept hidden by the Byzantine emperors for centuries. It was publicly displayed in Constantinople shortly before the Crusaders arrived, and it seems that one of the leading Crusaders brought it back to France, where it remained privately until the first public display in Lille, France in the 1350s. After suffering from fire, it was entrusted to the royal family of Savoy, who brought it to its current location in Turin, Italy, hence the words Shroud of Turin. In 1898, the shroud is photographed by the Italian photographer Secondo Pia for the first time, and to everyone's shock, the photos revealed that the shroud bears a negative image, which turned into a black and white positive image when it was developed. This is going to kind of kick it in gear right here. We're going to talk about its material and what's attached to it. Now, the Shroud of Turin is made, we all know, of fine linen, but it's woven in a 3-to-1 herringbone pattern. Now, the direction of the twist of the strands, they rule out Egypt as the country of origin and affirm Palestine. The shroud's length and width, it's even in cubits, a unit of measurement not used in medieval Europe, where critics say the shroud was faked. But it was used in ancient Israel. The unusual weave reflects a wealthy owner, and Joseph of Arimathea, he was certainly wealthy. Matthew 27:57. In 2002, conservation measures were taken secretly for the shroud in Italy, with the 16th century backing cloth removed from the shroud for the first time. And textile experts, Methylide Fleury Lemberg, I don't know if I said that right, discovered a rare type stitch on the backside of the shroud, which was known from only one other place, the Masada fortress in Israel, which fell to the Romans in the Jewish revolt less than a generation from Jesus' time. It's getting serious, people. No medieval examples of the herringbone stitch used to make the shroud's linens have ever been uncovered. Though there are ancient matches from the Near East, even more intriguing is the dirt found on the shroud, especially around the nose, knees, and feet. This dirt is dirt and stone. It matched dirt and stone found in other tombs in and near Jerusalem. Let's take a look at the image itself. But before we do that, look, let's not make this about religion versus science versus religion. It seems here that we have a weird combination of both of them just banging together. So let's talk about the image itself. How the shroud's image was imprinted, we don't know. We don't got a clue. However, it wasn't painted, as the image rests only on the very top of the linen threads and no paint material soaked into the threads underneath. It was discovered in the late 1800s that the shroud has the qualities of a photographic negative, which is why a negative of it produces a clearer image. The image also has, get this, a three-dimensional quality. Some current theories point to radiation or an electric field as responsible for producing the image, if we know those existed in both medieval times and the times of Jesus, right? Anyone who's actually seen the shroud or a full-length, high-detail reproduction of it knows that the image of the crucified man is a negative rather than a positive image. How or why an alleged forger did that, there's no answer to that. But to recognize the image, one must be 6 or 8 feet back from the shroud. Any closer and the image on the cloth is lost. This fact further argues against the forger. How could such an image be created by someone working up close? Good question. The shroud contains real blood, both pre and post mortem, which has recently been to be shown from a torture victim. It is faithful to Jewish burial practices, as well as the Roman method of crucifixion. As such, it does not match medieval imagery of the crucifixion, which portray nails in Jesus' hands and feet, but rather in the wrists and ankles, in accord with the archaeological evidence of a Roman crucifixion. Normally, blood becomes brown as it ages. The blood of the shroud is red though, which it seems impossible even if it's 2,000 years old. This has been advanced as evidence of a fakery. But blood chemists know changes in the blood of persons under great stress or suffering, like say a crucifixion victim. Bilirubin is a pigment that enters the blood with the breakdown of red cells. It causes blood to hold a red color. Did a forger use actual human blood and torture his donors so the blood will remain red for centuries? Then paint the blood on a linen cloth before there was an image, all in order to fool people centuries later? The blood stain, they were imprinted on the shroud before the image was made. The only known explanation for the formation of the image is an intense burst of vacuum ultraviolet radiation, equivalent to the output of 14,000 excimer lasers, emitted from every three-dimensional point of the body in the shroud. Dude, I just got chills reading that. It's my script. I'm reading my script, but I got chills. And it gets better. There's even more evidence. Only in very recent times have scientists found a way to discolor linen strands as they are found in the Shroud of Turin. Discolorations penetrating only to a tiny fraction of the width of a human hair. and it was done with microbursts from high energy lasers. A burst of high energy. This carries suggestions of its own about the man of the shroud, because if it is Jesus, he is proclaimed to be raised from the dead. Ask the question, is the shroud a virtual snapshot of the resurrection? And without the resurrection, there is no Christianity. Now currently, we know of no natural explanation for the seemingly unique occurrence such a burst of vacuum ultraviolet radiation from either a decomposing body or the geological atmospheric conditions within the tomb. Though this is suggestive of a possible supernatural origin of the radiation, perhaps as part of Jesus' resurrection. Quote, the closer the cloth was to the body, the more it was singed, the darker was the color. A miracle happened. The body dematerialized in the shroud. It gave off laser-like energy in a laser beam focus that caused pixelation in 5.2 billion locations to create an image on the front and the back. Whew. Now things start to get a little shady. We're talking about the bad carbon dating. You know, like a catfish. They tell you one thing, you show up, there's something else there. In an attempt to determine the shroud's authenticity, in 1988, scientists at 3 separate laboratories dated samples from the shroud to a range of 1260 to 1390 AD. So that's it, right? Shroud's fake, story over. And that coincides with the first certain appearance of the shroud was in 1350, so that all jives up. It's much later than, of course, the burial of Jesus in 30 or 33 AD. But, of course, there was a problem with those findings. The Vatican, which owns the shroud, they refused to allow other researchers to access the data.
I got a call from Ray, and he goes, this is nonsense. I can prove these people wrong in 5 minutes. And I said, well, Ray, go for it.
In this new effort, the research team sued the University of Oxford, which had the data. They sued them for the access, and they won. Now, after studying the data for 2 years, the new research team announced that the study from 1988 was flawed. Why? Because it did not involve study of the entire shroud. Just some edge pieces. Edge pieces from the shroud are rumored to have been tampered with or fixed by nuns in the Middle Ages. They were seeking to restore damage done to the shroud over the years. Now, the raw data from the 1988 test, they showed that the test samples were heterogeneous, invalidating the results completely.
I read their paper and I thought, I've got the samples that can shoot that full of holes. So I got out the Ross samples and I got out the shroud samples, and I went to work again.
He discovered that the wrong samples were selected for the dating. He concluded the radiocarbon sample was thus not part of the original cloth and was invalid for determining the age of the shroud. He also calculated a new date between 1300 and 3000 years old.
Segment from the original shroud was spliced into the new.
Here's a few more things you might now know about the shroud. In 1999, a study by the International Botanical Conference finds that the flowers and plants may have been placed on the Shroud of Turin alongside the original crucified body. The study identifies, quote, a high density of pollen of the thistle Gundelia tutti, which has bloomed in Israel between March and May for a millennia. According to Science Daily, the Gundelia tutti is believed to be the plant that was used in Jesus' crown of thorns. Whoa. And the samples on the shroud predate the 8th century. And then we have 2005. Raymond Rogers publishes a study that highlights flaws in the 1988 C14 dating conclusions, including the fact that the carbon dating teams had cut from the corner of the cloth an area that had been handled by clergy and authorities for centuries. Now, 4 contemporary dating tests: the vanillin dating test of Dr. Raymond Rogers, the 2 spectroscopic analysis of Professor Julio Fanti, and the compression and breaking strength test of Fanti date the shroud to a time commensurate with the life and crucifixion of Jesus. But there's more. And then there's this, Roman coins on the eyes of the image on the shroud. Have you heard about that before? Well, yeah, there were Roman coins on the eyes of the image of the shroud, which give evidence that it's highly probable that the image of the man on the Shroud of Turin has 2 Jewish lepta, minted in AD 29 by Pontius Pilate himself in Judea at the time of Jesus' lifetime, on his eyelids. Look at this. 2013, scientists used infrared light and spectrography to date the shroud between 280 BC and 220 AD. That's a period that just ironically includes Christ's lifetime. And in 2018, a new forensic study uses a live volunteer and a mannequin to examine how blood might naturally flow onto a cloth. Scientists were unable to find an explanation for how natural blood flow could have created the imagery on the shroud. Just wait, I bet you've never heard of the next one, because I sure didn't. Did you know there was a face cloth of Jesus as well? The Gospel of John, chapter 20, verses 6 and 7. These verses read as follows. Simon Peter, following him, also came up, went into the tomb, saw the linen cloth lying on the ground, and also the cloth that had been over his head. This was not with the linen cloth, but rolled up in a place by itself. John clearly differentiates between this smaller face cloth, the sudarium, and the larger linen that had wrapped the body. The shroud matches bloodstains from the sudarium of Oviedo, the headcloth used to cover Jesus' face after the crucifixion and in his burial. There is documentation that it was brought to Spain after the Persian invasion of Syria in the 7th century. When the 2 cloths are compared, the bloodstains match up identically. One of the relics held by the cathedral in the town of Oviedo in the north of Spain is a piece of cloth measuring approximately 84 by 53 centimeters. There is no image on the cloth. Only stains are visible to the naked eye, although more is visible under the microscope. The remarkable thing about this cloth is that both tradition and scientific studies claim that the cloth was used to cover and clean the face of Jesus Christ after the crucifixion. Dr. Alan Wanger applied the polarized image overlay technique to the sudarium, comparing it to the image and the bloodstains on the shroud. The frontal stains on the sudarium show 70 points of coincidence with the shroud, and the rear side shows 50 points of coincidence. The only possible conclusion is that the Oviedo sudarium, the face cloth, covered the same face as the Turin Shroud. It seems that the sudarium was first used before the dead body was taken down from the cross and discarded when the body was buried or put in the tomb. This fits in what we learn from John's Gospel, which tells us that the sudarium was rolled up in a place by itself. But was that the only thing? No, there's even more. But what about Jesus' clothes? What about his robe, his tunic? Well, that's known as the holy tunic of Argentio. Quote, when soldiers had crucified Jesus, they took his clothes and they divided them into 4 shares, a share for each of the soldiers. They also took his tunic, but the tunic was seamless, woven in one piece from top down. So they said to one another, let's not tear this up, but let's cast lots to see, who's going to get it. In order that the passage of scripture might be fulfilled that says, they divided my garments among them, and my vesture they cast lots. This is what the soldiers did. It was a seamless robe, believed to have been the garment worn by Jesus Christ during his passion, his crucifixion, and it was gambled over by the Roman soldiers. It's currently on display at the Basilica of St. Denis in Argenteuil, France. The tunic measures 1 meter across and just under 1 meter long. It's woven from sheep's wool, dyed purple brown by a mixture of madder, which is a plant. It's found in the Mediterranean region, and a mordant of iron. And I'm sure a mordant means a little bit of iron. Otherwise, I don't know what you're doing. Anyway, get this though. This is the kicker. In 1998, scientists from the Optics Institute in Paris found that the bloodstains on the tunic coincided with the wounds visible on the Shroud of Turin, and the AB blood type is the same as on the shroud and the sudarium of Ovidio, the face cloth. I don't know. It's quite a few coincidences there, just saying. This is really going to be a problem for those people that say it's a 15th century hoax. Let's talk about the poker holes. In 4 places, L-shaped sets of burns appear on the shroud. These are damage from before the first stone fire of 1532. The burns are often called the poker holes. These poker holes, they might just be the smoking gun. No pun intended. There's an illustrated book called the Hungarian Prayer Manuscript, and it's kept in Budapest. A painting of Jesus' burial that certainly seems to portray the shroud is contained in that manuscript. Not only does the figure of Jesus match the shroud's crucifixion man, hair, beard, arms crossed, but the herringbone weave is shown on the cloth. And there, too, are the poker holes. The Prayer manuscript is dated to 1192. Now, this poses a great problem for those that would dismiss the shroud as a fake because of the carbon-14 dating of the shroud that happened in 1988. Many people stopped paying attention to the shroud. They're like, nah. When they learned that the carbon-14 determined possible dates for the shroud were around 1260 to 1390 AD. Newspaper headlines screamed the shroud was proved a fake. But the Hungarian Prayer manuscript testifies to the shroud, already in existence at least 70 years before the earliest possible carbon-14 date. Did the impossible happen? It seems it did. The research of the 1978 Stirp investigation, as well as subsequent research of Jackson, Fonti, Paolo di Lazzaro, and all their teams, showed a likelihood that sometime after the blood deposits had dried on the shroud, the decomposing body in the shroud emitted a short, intense burst of vacuum ultraviolet radiation that led to a dehydration and discoloration of the frontal and dorsal parts of the shroud. Currently, the known laws of physics cannot explain how a decomposing body can emit an intense burst of vacuum ultraviolet radiation. Furthermore, they cannot explain how such a body could become mechanically transparent and emit light from every three-dimensional point within it. So, where does that leave us? If Jackson's explanation continues to be the only one to explain away the enigmas, and if future articulations of the laws of physics cannot explain how a decomposing body could become mechanically transparent and evenly emit vacuum ultraviolet radiation from every three-dimensional point within it, then we are left at the brink of a transphysical or metaphysical explanation. Under these conditions, it would be both reasonable and responsible to believe that a transphysical cause interacted, opposing body to transform it into an intense burst of light. And I'm just going to put this out there. It would take more energy than in the year 2024 we could even produce planet-wide. The amount of energy it would take to do this is beyond our capabilities even today. Monday morning. They found the stone rolled away from the tomb, but when they entered, they did not find the body of Jesus. Luke 24, 2-3. While the women were wondering about this, suddenly 2 men in clothes that gleamed like lightning stood beside them. In their fright, the women bowed down with their faces to the ground. Luke 24, 4-5. The angels asked the woman, "Why do you look for the living among the dead? He's not here. He is risen. Remember how he told you while he was still with you in Galilee. The Son of Man must be delivered unto the hands of simple men, be crucified, and on the third day be raised again." Then they remembered his words. Luke 24, 5-18. I don't know. Think we put a lot of evidence out there? What do you guys think? Leave a comment down below. For those of you out there saying this is nonsense, this is a fake, I understand where you're coming from. But do this. Recreate it. Just recreate the Shroud of Turin. It should be very simple if it's a fake, right? But we don't have enough power in the free world, the whole world, to recreate this image. Just do it. And I'll quiet down. But from what I see, something really different went on here. Like I said, just reproduce it. That's all. Let's get out of here. This is the longest video I made. I think I need a nap. And don't be upset by this, regardless of what your position is. And hit the subscribe button. God, what's wrong with you people? Alright, let's get out of here.